Trump is begging Iran to go another way. Literally, he's begging them to do it. He might even give them the tolls if they would just talk nice to President Trump. They're not doing it because they're not going to bail out Trump. Oh, I'm great, and it's really great to be here with you again, Fergus. And as I was just saying to you offline, it actually doesn't seem like 5 weeks. It just seems so recent. So it's great to talk to you. Yeah, no, no, Donald Trump has no control over the situation whatsoever. He can control it to the extent he can do more bombing, he can do more escalation, but he can't de-escalate the problem here. And he's been trying. He's desperate to get out of the escalation trap, but it's a trap. And it's exactly what I said when we were on. In fact, the stages, I published them just so your new listeners will know, days before the first bomb fell. So laid out the stages that we're going to go through. We have gone through. It's been completely validated by events. There's no and it's because I've modeled the bombing of Iran for over 20 years. I have taught for the U.S. Air Force. I have this deep background in blockades, economic sanctions. So yeah, just the normal thing you have on a Sunday morning, right? So I just have spent my life, my decades, doing a lot of understanding of military force and politics, which is what is unique for me. So it's military folks, and I know I've taught them. They know a lot about the tactics, but the real issue with war is when military engages with politics. And that's not something that your pollsters know because they may know the politics. That's not something the military knows. They may know the tactics. But that's been my lane. That's why I've advised every White House from 2001 to 24, chiefs of staff of the Air Forces, secretaries of defense, et cetera, et cetera. This is it's not because they can't go find more military people, and it's not because they can't find more pollsters. It's because this is a unique lane for. So I just want to help your listeners know where I'm coming from. And so, yes, I've been saying from the beginning, multiple articles of 700 words, 1,000 words on Substack, that we have the illusion of control, and you keep seeing Donald Trump trying to seize control. He's trying to. This is why he is saying what appears to be these outlandish things, Fergus, that that Iran has done X or Y, has agreed to X or Y. What he's doing is he's projecting an image of control. Now, folks like you and me, and a lot of your listeners here are following this closely. It seems to us to make no sense, but we need to understand that 60% of the American public, the people who are the disengaged, who voted for Trump more than any other president ever in their lifetimes, aren't following politics and aren't following the news this closely. So when President Trump says these things, people are scratching their head. Well, isn't this counterproductive? Doesn't it make him look stupid, et cetera, et cetera? They're just not understanding that Donald Trump, and I'm not saying this with any glee or hostility either way, he is the most effective president we have ever had. And that is because he can connect with audiences no other president could connect with in our lifetimes. Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, the first George Bush, they couldn't connect with the disengaged. What Trump is doing is connecting with this audience called the disengaged, and you do it differently. And now I don't know how much that will help him because they're disengaged. So I'm not trying to tell you this will magically fix his problems, but I am just trying to explain for your listeners what appears to be this like ongoing paradox, and people keep wanting to put Trump on the couch. Is he this, unbelievable psychopath, or is he lost touch with reality? Okay, we can all do that, but how many of us have spent the last hour with Donald Trump? I don't think that many. So what you're really seeing, though, is a pattern here of consistently connecting with the disengaged, and that apparently we read tweets at 3 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken, I guess we're talking about kind of a different subset of people, but we've spoken to so many contributors on this show that said the one pattern from this war that you can rely on is that it is almost impossible to trust anything you hear from both sides until you see actual direct action.
Well, that's what I say here. If they ignore the rhetoric, I call it sometimes when we're doing it the victory rhetoric here. Ignore the rhetoric and follow the behavior. And I've laid out indicators on the escalation trap Substack here. I do this all the time. I'm trying to explain that if you notice one of the, well, sort of a super macro indicator is since the beginning, since the first bomb has fallen, U.S. troops have been flowing into the region, different ways, different paces. None have come out. So in 8 weeks, we don't have a single case where we have over a week fewer forces in the region than we had the week before. Not a single week. So we can all talk about how this is all going to end and so forth and so on, and China's going to come in and really clobber their ally Iran finally and all this. But this is all just wishful thinking, okay? And it's not tracking the actual indicators that are mattering, which is, as you're saying, Fergus, not the rhetoric, which is kind of fun to play with too, but the actual behavior indicators. And what you see on both sides is it's not linear. Like it's not like every single day you're getting more and more escalation. And it does seem we have pauses. That's what I mean by it not being linear. But what you are seeing is a consistent pattern of escalation. And I lay out these stages. We can talk more here. And I try to do it out 2 or 3 weeks. So my Substack community is the most informed ever. That's what I try to make them, more informed than what you're watching elsewhere. And they seem to really, it's exploding. So they really seem to like it because they really are seeing, like yesterday, for instance, I just posted this long post where I said, okay, the ceasefire is gonna end. Here are the next 3 stages. And stage 1 was demonstrative use of force, such as seizing ships in the Strait of Hormuz. And what happens? We wake up today, and what did Iran do? I mean, literally on cue. And I don't think they read the Substack, by the way, because this is in English. And also they couldn't have had time to organize this. So it's not that. But what literally on cue, and what are they doing, Fergus? They're demonstrating. It's about demonstration uses of force, which in my business is a whole category of use of force. Now, that may not be quite as familiar to people that haven't spent 30 years in this subject matter, but it is really, they're all articles about it. You can Google demonstration force, and you will spend days getting lost in the maze of all the ways states have used signals to signal. And what are they signaling? They're in control. That's what they're signaling. Coming down the road here. So what you are seeing, I called stage 3 deliberately on Feb 25. So let's go back days before the bombing. So just so people know, stage 1, we would do bombing, hit target, kill leader. Stage 2, Iran would lash back, horizontal escalation, take Hormuz. Stage 3, ground power dilemma. So stage 3 was always going to be a dilemma. So it's you can track where we are with it, but you can't, like a crystal ball, say, well, it's going to happen on May 1st, or it's going to happen. That's what people want. But that's not the way you do risk assessment. You do it the way I'm doing it, which is you have ground power dilemma. And what you see, Fergus, is that before the bombs fell, J.D. Vance said, never going to think about ground forces. Well, then once this thing started to go belly up, all of a sudden we heard CARG, we hear Marines moving. Well, now what you finally have gotten are some actual briefings with President Trump. And you see this in some of the reporting in the last week or so, where he's saying, oh my God, really? That many people are going to die when they take CARG? Really, really, really? Well, yeah, really, really, really. So he's now trying to find all these other ways to exert escalation. And that's what the blockade came from. Here, that's where the idea of the electric power came from. That's where this implicit nuclear threat came from to end civilization. That's all coming, Fergus, from this, him actually seeing numbers put in front of him on how many Americans going to die. Well, and I mean the troops. Well, but now he's seeing put in front of him for real that Iran is not playing the game. Iran is not playing the game of helping bail him out with a face-saving gesture, the way people are saying, just give Trump a face-saving gesture, let him declare victory so our economy can go home. No, Iran is not playing that game because Iran is perfectly happy to sink the United States American economy, which is $40 trillion in debt, and it's very happy to have us go through a massive recession. And if it can get us to the 1970s, I think there are going to be so many people in the Iranian government that will pop. I don't know if they'll pop corks because but they will be so happy because they are really, really tired of for years. Every time Israel and the United States wake up one day and decide to kill some leaders and drop some bombs, they've been doing that. And so exactly why are they bailing out the West and Trump and Americans here? Why exactly? They're not. And that's what you're seeing. And they're what they did today, by the way, first, I don't know if you saw it just before I came on here, they were showing some images on the TV, which is they have big parade today with missiles like they do in North Korea.
I've seen them, yeah.
And what these are directed toward your cities, America. Okay, this is what you have to look forward to. You want to keep messing with us? Get ready for some harm. That's what they're signaling. They're demonstrating, Trump, you can say all you want and you can, threaten us, bluster us, talk about, they don't care. What they care about is being in control. And I do think they actually have a preference for hurting America's, and I think it's the economy, really, they want to hurt.
Do you think Trump is starting to understand that? I'm gonna contradict myself slightly from what I said earlier about not being able to trust what comes out of either camp. Because I spoke to a contributor yesterday, and we were talking about a post that Trump had made a couple of days ago, essentially talking about these negotiations and, he was going to get a deal and it was going to be so much better than the JCPOA. But there was no mention of enriched uranium. There was no mention of regime change. And then when he made that post last night saying he was extending the ceasefire, it was like so kind of un-Trump with how he wrote it. There was no grandstanding. It was just say, Pakistan's asked us to do this and we're going to cooperate. I mean, is this kind of him soft launching a rollback?
Yeah, just to parse this a little bit so that, because people are thinking that when Trump posts, he's always talking to the same audience, right? Because it goes out to everybody. And a good way to think about this, I was just trying to get helping a journalist because they all want stories and stuff. And I'm just trying to tell them that a good way to parse this, because I do national surveys of the US, but this is a part of me your listeners don't know, is that think of the public as 60, 30, 10. 60, 30, 10. 60% are the disengaged. They're the ones who maybe they're following this once every 5 minutes, every few days. And so when Trump says going to get the big, beautiful bill and all that works for that group. 60% of the public's not small change. Then you have 30% that are following it probably on a daily basis, maybe a half hour a day. And for them, it still works pretty well what Trump is doing. Then you have the 10%. And that 10% is also the Iranian leadership. That's what that post was. We're extending the ceasefire. He was talking not to the 60 or the 30 or even the 10% in America. He's targeting directly those Iranian leaders. And then what did the Iranian leaders do when they got his post? They seized those tankers. So they said, well, they didn't even bother responding to his post. They just did it.
Do the Iranians not see that post and they think, we haven't given you what you want, we're not turning up to these talks in Islamabad, and you're still going to extend the ceasefire? I mean, they must be delighted looking at that.
I think what they thought when they saw the post is they're reading Trump correctly. And I think they're also, although maybe they don't see it as 60, 30, 10 first, they're probably understanding what I'm saying a little more than the public because they're, of course, deep in this. So what I think is you're seeing that the Iranians are reading us better than we're reading Iran. And partly that's because we keep having this myth that, yes, we bombed their leadership, therefore they must be fractured. Well, I just posted on X. If the Iranian leadership is fractured, it's between those who want to play hardball and those who want to play more hardball, hardball versus more hardball, because we killed all the doves. we literally, when we targeted, we killed 80% of the leaders we killed were the most dovish of the group of leaders that lived in Iran, that were in Iran. And so it's not like we had this target set of leaders and we targeted 80, 90% of the hawks. What we did is we targeted, and apparently the ones we could find were the ones who were the doves who didn't think they were going to get killed because they didn't hide their tracks. So we did target and kill them. But what that's done is it's put the hawks even more in charge. You see what I mean? And that's what you see. So we keep saying they're fractured, they disagree, they do all this. Yeah, it's between hardball and more hardball.
And this is something else I spoke to another contributor about. The US don't seem really at all prepared. And after they took out Khamenei, they don't seem at all prepared to negotiate with this new kind of team of hawks, like you say.
Well, that's exactly right, because it's all very crystal clear that they're looking for, well, maybe the foreign minister, maybe the chief parliament, maybe this guy. But what you're seeing is the Iranians are actually using the negotiations here to hurt us. So first of all, they want Vance. They want Vance. Well, that's picking from, in their mind, when they do hawk and dove, they're picking the most dovish person in the Trump administration. Now, Vance wouldn't like him being called a dove, so I don't really mean to, in no way, trying to insult people.
But they realized early on that he never thought that this operation was a good idea.
That's right. It wouldn't be very hard. Read the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. This is not like, exactly intel. This is, and what most people probably don't really know is that the best intel is what's called open source. That's the big secret in intel, is that the actual intel that 90% matters, you can be confident in with 90% confidence and all that. It's called open source, which means just what we read in the papers and the media every day. The stuff that is all like cryptic and so forth, this is all this stuff that, well, maybe it's 20% reliable, 30% reliable. So that's why I had a clearance a long time ago. I don't want a clearance because I think it's at least as distracting and get you confused is helpful. And what I found then, even when I was, is it the actual information that mattered. 90%. There was the tiny times that was classified, but the actual stuff that mattered was just simply in the open.
If we go back then to the zero-sum conflicts and what you said about them, I think something you've written recently was that they are not things that are over quickly; they grind forward month by month.
So let me explain this is why the ceasefire broke down so quickly. So you remember there was a moment of hope. We were on Tuesday night, and I was on a media thing here as the news was breaking that Trump was accepting the ceasefire according to the 10-point plan, which is Iran's plan. Then the Iranian government does, and this is all happening, and that really happened. And so we thought, oh my goodness, we're actually now have a glimmer of hope. And then the next couple of days, one of the points in the 10-point plan was Israel stops military force in Lebanon. And what happened? Israel the next morning used a bunch of force, but then the Trump administration came in and Marco Rubio came in and said, Israel, you come to Washington. You're going to start meeting with these Lebanese members of the Lebanese government, the Maronite Christian part. Well, that then actually produced a truce. And then even Hezbollah after that said, well, we'll abide by the truce if Israel does. So think about that. We actually had this like almost 48-hour period, which sounds like a short time, but it was the longest peace we've had. We actually had this 48-hour period where things were actually on the glide path. And then what happened? Within a day, within literally hours, both sides it all broke down, and there was shooting again in the Straits, both sides, over the next couple of days. And now you're back here with what you had. Now, why is that? It's because the core issues, Fergus, are not about a misunderstanding. They're not misunderstanding each other where they just need to sit side by side, look at the same piece of paper, and now we get clarity, like you might in a real estate deal. No, this is not about that. This is the issue of the nuclear enrichment and material, and also the Strait of Hormuz are zero sum. Either Iran controls the strait or it does not. Either Iran has this enriched material for nuclear weapons or it does not. And so, and now you have two of them. Before we had the one problem, now we have two of these. And this is why you get them, they're breaking down, because when you have these zero sum issues, they're ultimately, Fergus, about power. Somebody's going to have to give up. And that's what you're seeing. And when you give up, you're giving up power. So the rest of the world may say, well, my gas prices are going up. What these states are talking about is power, and power dominates in world politics. Power is king. It is number one. And that is why this is breaking down. And it would, even if Vance had gone to Pakistan yesterday, and even if the Iranians had come to meet, these zero sum issues where you can't have it, but you can't slice it down the middle. These zero sum issues are what is holding everything up. And they are probably going to hold things up for a long time. And the rest of the world is going to cry and yell and scream because their costs are going through the roof.
But if we take it as it is at the moment, the US, at least to me, I think publicly, they seem very reticent at the moment to escalate more militarily. In that case, then if it is a grind over a few months, I mean, what do those next months look like?
They look like more control of the Strait of Hormuz to Iran, and then increasingly, let me talk two stages here. Stage one over the next few months is going to be Iran's going to start imposing these tolls. It's going to start exerting this leverage again. And what that means is that unless you dance to Iran's tune, here, that means moving away from the United States, maybe even having to kick some of the military bases out of Bahrain, for example. What's going to happen is the economies of Bahrain, I'll just pick Bahrain as an example, are going to go down 20 or 30%, not 2%. Not 1%. And it's not a small thing for a country to lose 30% of its GDP. That's a pretty big hit. We haven't had that since the 1930s, and even then it wasn't that bad. So this is that bad for these countries. So that's just stage one, Fergus, and that's going to go on for a while. So you're going to see what that control of the Strait of Hormuz looks like is going to be true power, true money, lots of money going into the coffers of Iran. Here now, the stage beyond that is Iran is going to use that growing influence to try to topple the governments of the UAE and Saudi Arabia, maybe assassinate those leaders. Because after all, they participated in the assassination of their leaders. So when Iran says they want payback, the payback here that's why the UAE, by the way, and Saudi Arabia are so adamant. You can't leave us, President Trump. You can't possibly imagine you're going to leave and just go off to Cuba, because they're in the Iranian gun sights for real, and they're just right across the strait. And anybody who thinks that Iran has no cards to play has not been paying attention for 8 weeks. So there's a lot of cards here that Iran has yet to play. So this is basically going to mean Iran will be more and more on the winning track, gaining more and more power. America will be on the losing track. And then the economy here will be basically the chessboard, where if you play nice with Iran, you're like India, you get more benefits. If you don't, and you're like UAE and Saudi Arabia, you get pain. And this is what Iran is becoming slowly, emerging as the fourth center of world power.
Even once this is all over?
Well, unless we go in with ground forces. We are at what you're seeing, Fergus, we're on a fork of the road. We either go down the path. Trump's trying to go a third way. It's just not happening. So I'm not saying you wouldn't like to have a third way. I'm saying it's unavailable, and this is being demonstrated literally day by day by day, because Trump is begging Iran to go another way. Literally, he's begging them to do it. He might even give them the tolls if they would just talk nice to President Trump. They're not doing it because they're not going to bail out Trump. Now, maybe, some people have asked me, Fergus, well, won't they eventually cut a deal? They might after the midterm. Once Trump presidency has been completely, thoroughly wrecked, irrecoverably wrecked, now you're in a different situation if you're Iran. Now you've demonstrated this enormous power. You've wrecked a presidency in the United States, now you're in a different position and you might start cutting a deal.
Is there any scenario? One thing we're always pretty certain of is that whatever happens, Donald Trump will claim victory. You mentioned kind of the disengaged earlier.
Yeah, even as he goes off to St. Andrews and plays golf the rest of his life.
Well, this is the thing: is there no scenario at all where the US kind of almost walks away with where things are at the moment and says, "Oh, we've caused Iran so much trouble," and then maybe 10 years later they'll go back in again?
Well, no, they might do that first, and that's a possibility. But what that will mean is Iran will fill that power vacuum with their power. And that's what I'm describing as then toppling the government of the UAE, toppling the government of Saudi Arabia. So the status quo here is not stable. So this is not a situation like if the United States would only leave, and a lot of Democrats were saying this weeks ago, and I think I've kind of persuaded a lot of them that that's just not happening. That's a wrong way to think about it. They would like to say that it's all just Donald Trump, and if only we could erase Donald Trump from the equation. Here we go back to February 27 because we all understand we're all nice guys and we want to live together. No, that's not the world here. The world is if we pull back here. And certainly, if we just pull back the way you're describing, the way a lot of the Democrats have described, there's going to be a power vacuum, and that power vacuum is going to be filled by Iran. So what Iran is going to do is they're going to move even more rapidly to the emerging fourth center of world power, which isn't just growing economy. It will also be nuclear weapons in about a year. They will get that, but they'll get even more. And what that more is just like every world center of power, they don't like other countries in their neighborhood disagreeing with them. They're not going to like Saudi Arabia and UAE's government being around very long, and they're going to start to exert more and more energy to topple those governments for real. And if you topple Saudi Arabia, Iran, just think how much this will scare the world. You see what I mean? So this is the real problem. You could put a Democratic president in right now, they'd have exactly the same problem. In fact, Donald Trump is behaving like the most wimpish. I mean, look at what he's doing. He's begging them to take the ceasefire, and so how much more wimpish are you going to get?
We'll just end here because I think last time you were on our show, the Middle East Report, speaking to my colleague Ali, you said that the US actions in Iran so far were kind of the worst strategic defeat since Vietnam. If we look at the Vietnam sort of peace negotiations, I mean, they lasted over 4 years, close to 5 years, really.
Let's just call it 5. You're right. It's not quite 5, but almost.
We can call it 5, and obviously the North kind of used them as a strategic tool on the battlefield. I mean, I dread to think. I mean, are we looking at 5 years of negotiations here?
Well, I think the way to think about it is the real longer time horizon is between now and the midterms. What is Iran going to do? And that's how I bet they're thinking about it. And I think they want to wreck Donald Trump's presidency. Now, the Democrats want to wreck it, but they don't have the tools Iran has to wreck it. So this is not a matter of domestic politics anymore. I mean, it is a lot. I don't want to say not anymore. I want to say that Iran has some tools. And what they're going to do is, I think it's, they don't want to listen to their rhetoric. They want a situation where it is much less likely they will be attacked in the future. So what would you do to prevent being attacked in the future? Well, number one, you want nuclear weapons. Absolutely. Okay. Number two, you would like to topple the leaders who are actually attacking you with forces. Because if new leaders come in, whoever they are, whoever they are, or it's not so much Trump would be leaving office as he would have no power. And so that's what I really mean. De facto end of his presidency, not de jure. And so what you just listen to the idea. They're saying over and over, we want a world where we are less likely to be attacked. Well, given what's happened in the last several years, what is that going to really look like? Just being nice guy and just saying, we'll give you everything you want. Oh, you want our nuclear material and you promise you won't attack us? Who believes that? They surrender all of this power. What's going to happen is Donald Trump, Netanyahu are going to wake up in 6 months and come up with some other cockamamie reason. Why? Well, yeah, they gave us all that, but you know what? We still got to go back and we got to wreck the regime again and we got to do this. And it's just because we have a tweet at 3 a.m. telling us we're going to do that. So I'm just pointing out, this is not the real world here. Is the only way you're going to get security for Iran is with power. And that's what they're doing. This is about power and security. That is dominates wealth, and that dominates this emotional stuff of being nice guy and walking to yes and playing nice on the schoolyard playground. And it's because we have taught Iran a giant lesson. We're just going to bomb you anytime we want for whatever reason we say. And what would you do if you were in their shoes? I think you'd want atomic weapons. I think you would want power of the Strait of Hormuz. And I think if this was happening on the other side to America, are we really going to say, oh yeah, no, we'll just kowtow to these folks? No, you're going to get half of the American public, probably even half of the Democrats, to say, no, we're actually going to fight for our freedom.